Hey everyone, my name is Megan, otherwise known as Peg Leg Meg, and today I'm going to be telling you the story of how I became an amputee not even 4 months ago. On the 26th of October 2024, I decided to mow the lawn. I'd mowed the lawn plenty of times before, so this is nothing unusual. I had a ride-on mower at the time, and my wife and son were also in the backyard. We were just having a bit of a family day outside. So for whatever reason, this particular day, I decided to mow the lawn. We, like I mentioned, had a ride-on mower, so makes the job pretty easy and pretty quick. So yeah, I was out of our property mowing the lawn, and essentially, obviously there's a lot more that goes into it, but essentially I came off the ride-on mower. I was on a bit of an embankment and I came off it. I put my foot down to stop myself from falling, and the mower went over my foot. So that's a very basic overview of what happened, but essentially that's it. So a lawnmower took my leg. Since then, so that afternoon, I guess to give you a bit of story about the incident and my recovery and whatnot since then. So the accident happened just outside my property, and as I mentioned earlier, Steph, my wife, and my son were in the backyard. As I came off the mower and sort of heard and saw what happened, I obviously looked down at my leg and saw the state that my leg was in. And I just remember in that moment screaming for help and for somebody to come out to me. And I just remember thinking to myself that it just felt like one of those dreams where your voice isn't working, or you can't get your voice out. And it felt like no matter how loud I was screaming, it just felt like I couldn't possibly scream loud enough for anybody to be able to hear me. And it just felt like my voice wasn't working, and it was a really awful feeling. I still remember it today. But I've since learned that obviously wasn't the case. I actually was screaming extremely loudly, and my pretty much entire neighborhood did hear me, and my wife did hear me too. So within what felt to me like a very long time, but I think was only minutes, Steph came running towards me. When I came off the mower and hurt my foot, I obviously was in no state to walk or to really move, so I kind of just fell in place, which by this point I was kind of like laying down on the road looking up at the sky, and I just remember Steph running towards me, and I just remember her saying, it's okay, you're gonna be okay. But I could see by the look on her face that even though she was saying those words, from the look on her face and what, the state that obviously I could see my leg was in, I knew that things weren't okay. And she tells a story that one of the very first thing that I said to her was that I think I'm going to die. I remember thinking that throughout the entire incident. I remember thinking that because of the state of my injury and the amount of blood that I'd lost, I just remember feeling, I guess, just at peace, thinking that because of the state of the injury, there's just no way that I could possibly survive this, and the amount of blood that I'd lost and all of that. So I definitely remember thinking that as well. I don't remember saying it to her, but she obviously does. So yeah, she obviously was the first person that came out to me. My son was in our backyard, so I remember saying to her as well, like, I need you just to go in the backyard just to be with him. So she went back in the backyard. By this point, one of my neighbours had come out. My neighbour had come out with a shirt in her hand to tourniquet my leg. So she came straight over to me, had her shirt off, was wrapping a tourniquet around my thigh, and I just remember her saying to me, like, this is going to hurt. I'm going to do it as tight as I possibly can to obviously try and stop the blood flow. So she had tourniqueted my leg. By this point, Steph had kind of gone back inside in the backyard to be with Parker. We're very fortunate that Steph's mum, so my mother-in-law and Steph's stepdad, only live about 3-4 minutes away from our house. So she called her mum straight away, asking her mum to come over, and thankfully as well that this particular afternoon her uncle was down visiting her mum, and her uncle is an ex-police officer. So my mother-in-law went to be with my son inside, so he was looked after, he was cared for, and Steph came back out to me to help look after me. And yeah, it is all a bit of a blur, but I remember that Steph's uncle, his name's David, so Uncle David was sitting next to me and being, I'm assuming the ex-police officer in him just obviously was very calm. He knew what to do. I heard him on the phone to the ambulance, was, you know, coordinating and just sort of taking control of the situation and just really reassuring and really calming. And I just remember that the ambulance had said that there was no one sort of really close to where I was, and the ambulance was going to be about 20, sort of 30 minutes. And I remember hearing him say, like, she's not going to make it that long, like, you need to get someone here now. So the next thing I know is that an ambulance did arrive. I think it was still about 10 minutes, so it did take a fair while for an ambulance to come to me. I remember looking over, and there was, at this point, one had turned up, and then within minutes, like, police had turned up, and there was a fair few emergency services around. So I got in the back of an ambulance. The ambulance, well, before that, the ambulance officers came over, they administered pain medication, they wrapped my leg, made sure it was, you know, looked after, they tourniqueted my leg properly. So by that point as well, I should have mentioned that my neighbour obviously tourniqueted my leg initially, and then I remember somebody saying, does anybody have any belts on? So ironically, there was 2 people there, and I could not tell you to this day what they looked like, their names, I couldn't tell you anything about them, but there was 2 people there that had belts on. And I remember looking down at my leg, and there was 2 belts really tight on my thigh, tourniqueting my leg, and then also my neighbour's shirt. So my neighbours did an incredible job looking after me and making sure that I was safe and just essentially saving my life. So I'm extremely grateful and thankful to those people that were around. So that happened, the ambulance then came, they then obviously took over, they tourniqueted my leg with a proper tourniquet, they wrapped my foot up, they administered pain medication. From there, I was put in the back of an ambulance, and I knew that if I was driven to a hospital, that things were looking a little bit dicey. So very early on, the conversation was around me being airlifted to hospital. So I remember getting in the back of an ambulance, but I knew that I was being airlifted, and I heard the helicopter come over. There wasn't enough room, obviously, in my house or where I was for the helicopter to land, so it needed to land at the end of my street. There's a huge property, so it landed on that property. So for me to be able to get there, though, I had to be put into the back of an ambulance. The ambulance then took me onto this property, and I got put into the Westpac helicopter. I don't have a lot of memory I remember being put in the back of the ambulance, and I remember being in the helicopter. From being in the ambulance to the helicopter, I have absolutely no memory of that journey whatsoever. I mean, granted, it probably was 2 minutes or so, it wasn't a long time. I remember going into the Westpac helicopter, and you kind of go in on the side, so the chopper's this way. You kind of go in on the side, and I remember just thinking, like, how the heck is this going to work? Because I thought that I'd be too long for it, but you go in on the side, and then this, like, hoist thing kind of picks you up, moves you around, and sort of drops you, like, the length of the helicopter. And then in there, obviously, there's, you know, your Westpac doctors and your air doctors and all that sort of stuff. So I was in extremely good hands. I just remember looking up and around, and it just felt like you're in sort of like an operating theatre or an emergency sort of room. It's all like hospital in there. I also, so the helicopter obviously was taking me to the closest big hospital. That ride was probably 15, 20 minutes or so. I got so they obviously had given me a lot of pain medication because obviously I chopped my leg off. So I had been given really strong pain medication. I got really sick, really motion sick in the helicopter. I don't remember if I actually was physically sick or just remember feeling really nauseous. So I definitely remember feeling quite unwell. One of the only things that I do remember, I remember then landing at the hospital, being taken out. I then went straight into the emergency. The doctors obviously then looked at my foot. They rewrapped my foot and made sure it was all okay. Put a bit of a drain in and just did what they needed to do. By this point, it was sort of mid-early evening. I sort of stayed in emergency for a little while, trying to get my pain under control and all of that sort of fun stuff. Then that evening, I was taken to my room, to a ward, and I went in for my first surgery that night. So I had surgery obviously the day that I got to hospital, just a couple of hours later. So I remember being so I went and had surgery on my leg. At that point, we didn't really know what was happening. I didn't know whether or not I was going to be able to save my leg or if I was going to lose it. Because of the state that my leg was in, I kind of had accepted the fact that I just couldn't really comprehend how they could possibly save my leg. It was just, yeah, it didn't look like a foot anymore, to put it as PG as possible. But Steph, though, my wife, she was very optimistic. I remember her saying, like, absolutely they'll be able to save it. Like, of course they will. They can do incredible things. They'll just sew it back together. Everything will be fine. I remember, like, not being as optimistic as her, though, thinking like, oh, not sure about this, but we'll see. So that night, went in for a surgery. They obviously did what they needed to do, have a look at it to see what the options were. It wasn't until the next day, that just probably mid-morning by this point, I think, the doctors came to my ward, came to my room. I'm very fortunate that Steph was able to stay with me throughout the entirety of my hospital stay. I had a private room and she had one of those pull-out sofa beds that she slept on for nearly a month. So the very next day, so my first full day in hospital, the team came, the orthopedic surgeon team came. There was probably 4 or 5 sort of doctors, student doctors, everything there. And I just remember them standing at the foot of my bed, just saying really calmly that unfortunately, you know, we've had a look at your foot, and because of the way that it's been cut, it wasn't just like a clean cut where they can kind of put it back together. It was serrated. Obviously it was a blade, so the cuts were all different directions, and just I'd cut, blood flow, done a lot of damage. So I wasn't entirely shocked. Obviously, hearing that I was going to lose my leg was a huge thing to swallow, but because I wasn't really expecting to be able to save it, I kind of had prepared myself, I mean, as much as I could for the day before. Steph, however, took the news a lot harder than I did. I think because she was so optimistic that they were going to be able to save it, I think deep down she knew that I most likely would end up with it being amputated, but I think she was just holding on to hope that they would be able to save it. And in what should have been, I guess, one of the hardest times, and was obviously hearing about my foot, was also one of the funniest memories I've got from being in hospital. So as the surgeon is telling me that I'm going to be losing my foot, Steph, all of a sudden, she's standing right next to me. Obviously her bed is pretty much close to mine anyway. She looks over and she just goes, hey, like, I don't feel very well. Like, I feel really lightheaded. I just don't feel good. So the doctor instantly was like, okay, you need to lay down, elevate your legs. So I'm not even kidding when I say that my wife was on her back on her bed with her feet up in the air. The surgeon who's about to amputate my leg is standing there holding her legs while he's looking at me, telling me, hey, look, there's nothing we can do. Unfortunately, we're going to have to amputate. This is the options. We might do it in a couple of days. He's telling me that I'm losing my leg as he's holding up my wife's feet because she's almost fainted from the news. So in a way, I'm really grateful for that because it is such a funny memory. We often look back and laugh and it's like, of course in that moment, like, you just had to make it about yourself, didn't you? It's very, very funny. It makes a lighthearted moment from what was one of the worst moments. So found that out the next day after I was in hospital. They gave me a little bit of time to obviously process the news. It wasn't like I found out and that day they took my leg. They had said to me, obviously, this is a huge thing to get your head around. We'll give you a couple of days to digest it a little bit and to prepare yourself, which I'm really thankful that they did. I then had another operation a couple of days later, which they call a debridement, which is essentially they go back in, clean up the wound, clean it up basically. They put a drain in, did all of that sort of fun stuff. And then it was a couple of days after that I was scheduled for the amputation. So I went in, the accident happened on a Saturday. I had my first surgery that night. I had another surgery the Wednesday, and then my amputation was the Friday. So I was in hospital for almost a week before they actually amputated my leg. So that's how long I kind of had to, I guess, get my head around it. I mean, I don't think anything can actually prepare you for having a limb amputated. There's just nothing that can prepare you for that. And I thought before the surgery, that I'd sort of accepted it and I'd been at peace with it. But I still remember the first time waking up the next day after my surgery and just looking down at my leg or my legs, and just seeing that my leg was missing. Yeah, there's nothing that can prepare you for that, and was a lot to kind of take in and to digest. But since then, I have done a lot of recovery. I've been in and out of rehab. I spent just under a month in hospital, so I think it was about 3.5 weeks or something like that in hospital, and then I was discharged to come home. They had to make sure that my house was safe enough for me to come home, because obviously when I came home I was still wheelchair bound. I still had stitches in. I had what they call an RRD, which is a rigid I want to say like rigid something device, which essentially is like a fiberglass cast that you put over your stump. You can take it on and off, and you've got shrinkers, and it's just basically like a protection over your stump, because obviously the like amputated leg is so fresh and is healing, and there's a lot happening in there. You've obviously got your stitch line and whatnot, so this is to protect your stump at all costs. Obviously if you fall and whatnot, this is on there. And it takes a while for the stitches to come out and for everything to heal. So I came home with the RRD, and my stitches were still in my leg at this point as well, and just basically came home to heal and to recover for a little while before we kick-started into anything. While I was in hospital as well, I had already started physio while I had my leg sort of still, what the stitches were in, I still had it sort of bandaged and wrapped up and whatnot. You start physio, like I think 2 days after my operation I started physio. So there's no rest. You go straight into it, which I was really grateful for. I wanted to sort of my goal from the very start was to try and get back to life as quickly as I could. Obviously there's a lot to learn, and everything that you do, you have to now do extremely differently. So essentially that's the story of how I lost my leg and what happened since then. I have done a whole bunch of recovery. There's so much more that I could tell you about, the recovery day by day, all of that sort of stuff, but essentially that's what happened. That was my accident. That was about a month in hospital. Since then, I'm now 4 months post-operation. I'm doing physio twice a week with my physio, and then obviously training every single day. I am now able to walk unassisted without a wheelchair, without a walking frame, without crutches. I'm now on my prosthetic leg. I've been on my prosthetic leg now for a couple of weeks. So initially what happens is when you are discharged from hospital, you then need to wait for your leg the swelling to go down and for it to heal enough. You have to wait for your stitches to come out before you can even think about or start anything to do with your prosthetic leg. So I had already been discharged by the point of this happening, which meant that I was doing outpatient rehab, which meant that every week I was still going back to the hospital to see a prosthetist, and to see, for the first couple of weeks, my surgeon and also the physio. So weekly I would be going back to still do those. It was a couple of weeks after I'd been home that my stitches then came out, and then I was able to see my prosthetist. I got fitted for my prosthetic leg. And how it works in New South Wales, or in my case anyway, was that because I was still an outpatient, the hospital makes me what's called like a temporary prosthetic leg, which essentially stays with my physio in the hospital, and I can only use my prosthetic leg under the supervision of my physio. So for weeks, I think it was 5 weeks or so, I could only use my prosthetic leg for 1 hour a week with my physio, which meant that there was so much time in between, and every single time I went back, it felt kind of like starting from the beginning again, because my leg over the week hadn't been used to it. You can imagine that obviously having your leg amputated, where it's been cut and where your stump is, there's never been any pressure or any body weight or anything on the end of that stump. So now you need to try and desensitize your stump as much as possible to now essentially carry half your body weight and to be inside a socket and whatnot. So that was a big challenge for me. It was trying to overcome the pain and push through with my prosthetic leg. So it was about 5 weeks that I was only able to use it once a week with the physio, and then by that time they kind of have to sign you off, or just kind of the physio has to kind of agree that you can walk competently and safely enough with your prosthetic leg to be able to then take it home. And essentially you're then meant to sort of transfer into a community physio and not really sort of do it on your own. But so that was only a couple of weeks ago that I got my leg. And initially I got my leg, I was trying to use it for just a couple of hours a day, because everyone may not be like this, but for me it was extremely painful to have my prosthetic leg on. It was really painful on my shin bone, just a lot of pain, a lot more pain than I thought. So it was really hard for me to wear it because the pain was a lot. I couldn't wear it for too long. So it started with me just trying to wear it for sort of half an hour, then built up to an hour, and then just progressively started to wear it for a little bit longer. So now being a couple of weeks in, I initially started with a walking frame to sort of take some of my body weight and to help me with stability. And then from there, I went to crutches. And now, 3 weeks later, or maybe 4 weeks later, no, I think it's about 3 weeks later, I'm now walking completely unassisted. I can have my leg on for pretty much most of the day, almost pain-free, not entirely, but, I'm able to tolerate it enough now to have it on. I'm able to I went for my first walk the other day, only sort of around the block. There's still a lot that needs to be done, and I've still got a long way to go. I mean, I'm not even 4 months post-operation, but I'm really proud of how far I've come so far. I've been documenting my journey over on TikTok, and really just appreciate all the love and the support that I've been given. I'm really keen to continue documenting my journey. Let me know if there is anything in particular you would like to see a video on. Obviously there is so much that I could share with you guys, but I mean, I'd be here all day if I could. I could talk for hours on my recovery, my rehab, and my time in hospital and all of that sort of stuff. So leave a comment below if there's anything particular you would like to see a video on, or if you're just interested or curious about anything. I'm more than happy to answer and to share my experience. Follow me over on my Instagram. My Instagram handle is @itspeglikemeg, same as my TikTok, and I'm going to be uploading here on YouTube hopefully every week, daily vlogs, and just obviously sharing my journey and whatnot as well. So that's it. I really appreciate you watching this video and for your support and for following my journey. So hopefully see you around. Bye.